This is the MG4 X-Power, and today we're taking it for a drive to see if it's worth buying one of the most affordable performance EVs you can get. It's dual motor, it's all-wheel drive, and it can go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in just 3.8 seconds, and it can travel over 400 kilometers per charge. Now, if the likes of a Tesla Model 3 Performance or a Tesla Model Y Performance are too expensive for you, you might want to check out this, which actually costs less than the entry-level Tesla Model 3. So let's find out if buying one of the most affordable performance EVs is actually worth it. Now, the best part about this hot hatch is that, of course, it's electric, so it means it's going to be more affordable to fill up every time you need to go and visit the charger. Now, to charge this thing, you can charge it using DC fast chargers like this, and it's capable of accepting up to 140 kilowatts worth of charge. But this is a 50 kilowatt charger, which means it's going to charge a little bit slower. But it means that you can charge from 32 to 256 kilometers of range, which is around 10 to 80%, in around 24 minutes. So this isn't slow to charge at all. And it's really a fuss-free charging experience, and I found it to be pretty easy to live with. And there's no fancy electric door here that opens and closes. It's simply just a manual hatch like that. And unlike Tesla, MG will throw in a charging cable just like this if you need to plug into the wall in your garage or at home, which makes it just a bit easier, which means you don't have to visit a fast charger if you can do this overnight. This thing is ludicrous. So we were on a slight uphill there, and that was a claim 0 to 100 in 5.4 seconds. So that's nothing near what MG claims for the 0 to 100 time here. So let's try that again in 3, 2, 1, and that's insane. So it's kind of hard to get close to that 3.8 second 0 to 100 time using my timing gear, but yes, this is a pretty quick car. Now you're getting nearly 430 horsepower and 600 newton meters of torque from 2 electric motors, and it's creating an all-wheel drive system because you've got a motor at the front and a motor at the back. Now, here's the thing. For $60,000, this thing costs just over $60,000 drive away. It's a pretty good deal, and a lot of people are praising the MG4 X-Power for the fact that it's really affordable. So you're getting like Tesla Model 3 performance type acceleration for a lot less than a Tesla Model 3 Performance, and actually less than a base Model 3. So what sort of range are you getting per charge? Well, MG claims it's going to be around 400 kilometers. I've seen charge go over 400 kilometers as an estimate, and depends what sort of mode you're in. If you're in eco mode, you'll get more range. If you're in normal mode, you'll get slightly less range. If you're in sport mode, you'll get the least amount of range. Now, what is an MG4 X-Power? Well, the MG4 X-Power is the performance version of the MG4, which is a dedicated electric car from MG. So it is a Chinese electric car. It doesn't really matter where these cars are made anymore because Tesla makes their cars in China now, and so does Volvo, so does Polestar, so it is one of the more popular places to make electric cars. Now, I was already impressed with the MG4 as an electric car. It's quite affordable for an electric car, and that means that this is something that you have to ask yourself, does it need to exist? Well, when it was introduced, it's actually one of the best value performance EVs you can buy right now, if not the best value, because of the power you're getting an all-wheel drive system, getting decent range, all of this without getting anywhere near $100,000, which a lot of other cars like the Kia EV6 GT, the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, and the Tesla Model 3 Performance all command a over $100,000 price tag, or near there. So what are the good things? Well, of course, the acceleration. There's a healthy amount of torque here, and this thing actually doesn't weigh too much for an electric car. It weighs around 1.8 ton, which is actually kind of light for an electric car like this, which means that the power actually goes a little bit further than you might think. Now, you've also got an all-wheel drive system here, but I did find that the all-wheel drive system does get a little bit upset if it finds a slippery piece of road. So they say the metal expansion joints between some road on some concrete, it does like to slip on that a little bit in the wet. If you are accelerating, if you go over a speed bump and you are a bit eager on the throttle a bit early, it will sort of skip a little bit as well. It's just sending a lot of power to the wheels, and I don't really find that these tires do a great job of putting that all down smoothly. On a road like this, it's absolutely fine. You can plant your foot and you are moving just as you would hope. And if you go through a mid-corner like this, you can put your foot down and it's gonna be just fine. And I do love the MG4 for its handling characteristics. That low down battery is just incredible incredible in terms of just giving you a nice low center of gravity, and the steering feels relatively sharp, although it does feel a bit numb, I would say. I would like a bit more feedback through here, but as we sort of go higher up in the speed, it does have a variable steering ratio, so it does sort of firm up a little bit and becomes okay. But at low speeds, it does feel a little bit like you're playing a video game. And then cruising through some back roads here, this is quite a lot of fun. You do have upgraded brakes, but you do have brake caliper covers on them. So it does look like you have larger calipers than you actually do, but that doesn't really matter because you do have pretty large brakes. And so if we go for an emergency brake in 3, 2, 1, and yeah, does a good job of pulling up. Now you have LED lights up front, and you also have this matte paint called Hunter Green, and this thing will cost you $1,000 if you want your MG to have this matte green paint on it. Something I would absolutely suggest buying because it turns a lot of heads, it looks really good, and goes really nicely against those orange accents you get on the brake caliper covers. Now you have some larger alloy wheels on here, which I actually think look fantastic. They're much better than the ones that come with aero covers on them. And you're getting things like keyless entry, you're getting contrasting mirrors, and at the back you get this really cool looking spoiler, which I really like the look of. Now you can hear the safety systems are pretty active in here as well. This car does like to keep you centered in the lane, so if it even detects that you're getting a bit too close to the center line, it might get a bit upset, but you can turn all that off through the screen here. And at the back, the only thing to tell anyone that this is an MG4 is a giant MG4 badge. It says MG4 electric, but that's all that's going to be obvious, that this is a MG4 X-Power. There's actually no X-Power branding unless you look at the brakes, which is the only ways to tell that this is an MG4 X-Power. Now, as we blast it up here again, you can bury your foot in that throttle and basically anyone can drive this thing really fast. And it's nice to see that you're getting a proper amount of power for an affordable EV like this. But is it a performance car? Like, does it have all the performance car characteristics? Well, not really. It's just a fast electric car. A lot of people have asked and answered the question if this is a hot hatch. They said no. I've never really understood why they would call it a hot hatch. It's a bit big for a hatchback, and it's never really intended to be a hot hatch. I'd say something like the R-Bath electric, like the new electric R-Bath, would be something that could be classified as an electric hot hatch because it's front-wheel drive electric and it's trying to do all the right things to make it exciting like a hot hatch should. But this is more just like an affordable, fast electric car. And just because you're saving money doesn't mean you're losing performance, which I actually find quite nice. Now in the boot, you do have plenty of space as well, but you don't have any underfloor storage because the electric motor is there at the back, and you just have some goo to repair your tire in a tire repair kit, which isn't really that useful. You've also got some storage pockets on either side, and you do have a pretty flat load floor, and your seats do fold in a 60-40 split, which is, you know, useful if you want to put bigger items in here. And you do have a manual tailgate, which is something that's a bit, you know, for the price, you just hope that you could maybe get an automatic tailgate, but you won't get it here. You won't find any storage underneath the bonnet as well. That's where another electric motor lives and other bits and pieces. So MG haven't included any storage under there as well, which is just really frustrating. Even the entry-level models that don't have an electric motor up front, I do find that a bit annoying that we don't have storage underneath the bonnet. And inside, the back seats are actually really comfortable, but you want to sit behind the passenger because the electric adjustment for the driver does mean it eats into the rear feet room for the passengers that sits behind the driver. But because the passenger seat is manually adjustable, you do have plenty of feet room, knee room, and all that sort of stuff. And I do find it to be very comfortable sitting in the back seat of an MG4. Now, how's grip on a loose surface? Well, it's pretty good. Once you get past gravel and all that, the car does like to hook up, and away it goes. Now up front, you do have a 2-spoke steering wheel. It's exactly the same as you'd find it on another MG4, except this gets some slightly nicer Alcantara type materials, like suede material on the doors and on the seats, both in the front and the back. You do have faux leather. There's no real leather inside the MG4, and you do get this light orange stitching inside the X-Power. Now we still get the same displays as we did in the other MG4s, which is great because it means that sort of you are getting a lot of value in that entry-level model, but if you want to step up, you're really just paying for power and nothing really unnecessary up here. And so this screen in front of me is pretty useful. You can cycle through some trip information, some media information, and then you got your big digital speedo in front of you. It's placed nicely in this gap of the steering wheel, so you're never gonna have any issues in terms of like trying to find where your speed is. It's right there, and you can see what drive mode you're in, how much power you're using, and also how much range you have left is there as well. And this center screen here, I've actually been using it without Apple CarPlay and Android Auto just to see what it feels like to use the natural UI of this more affordable performance electric car. And look, it's pretty good. The navigation's great, except for the fact it will alert you every time that you enter a new suburb, which is really annoying. So it will just make this really annoying interruption in your music or podcast or phone call, or even just a conversation you're having inside the car, just to let you know that you have driven into another suburb, which is just completely unnecessary information, and you can't even turn that off, which is something I found incredibly frustrating when using the normal navigation, which is actually quite good without that chime. But in here you do have access to your drive modes, which you have snow, eco, normal, and you have a custom mode as well. You can also access your regen, which is pretty useful. You can access your one pedal driving mode, which for some reason doesn't save when I turn off the car or get out of the car, because this car has buttonless start, which again leads me to another frustration I have with the MG4, is that it does just take a little bit longer than a Volvo or a Tesla to sort of wake up and allow you to put this car in a drive. So it means you have to sit here for a couple of seconds longer than you would in a Tesla or a Volvo, just to let the car know that you're ready to go and drive, because that's a sense that you're sitting in the seat, the door's closed, you have your seatbelt on, all that sort of stuff, and then it can get going, which is just something I wish they would streamline or update or make a bit faster in an over-the-air update, or even at a dealership update. Now, talking about dealerships, you do get a 7-year warranty on this thing, which is actually pretty impressive, and that's another advantage of buying an MG4, is that you do get a pretty long warranty on it. But in saying that, Kia does offer a 7-year warranty for their electric cars too. And what I do like below the screen here is that you do have hard buttons, and yeah, you can use Apple CarPlay on this, but you have to use a wire, which is just slightly annoying, but at least you can use Apple CarPlay on this, unlike a Tesla. But the weird thing I found is that it seems to get confused every so often. So you plug Apple CarPlay in and it will put the controls over to the driver's side because it knows you're the driver, but then I've plugged my phone in again and it swaps them. So it puts the controls over to the passenger side, which is quite frustrating. And so it's just a weird glitch that I wish would get sorted out in, yes, another update. And then you have this rotary shift dial and a nice wireless charging pad, or you can thread a cable through up top. And so the wireless charging pad's fine if you just want to use Bluetooth, but if you're going to use Apple CarPlay, you have to use a wire anyway, which makes this wireless charging pad just a bit redundant. But at least there's nice cable management, which means your cable is up top with you rather than having to put it down near the cup holders. And in the back, it's just a bit annoying that we don't have any air vents. We just have one USB cable, which is USB Type A. So yeah, it's not the most practical rear seats if you are looking for air vents and USB ports. And so in terms of the ride as well, I do find that the MG4 does ride a little bit stiff. Maybe it's these larger wheels and more stiff, sporty focused suspension setup, but yeah, it does ride a bit stiff, which is just can be a little bit uncomfortable, and it can feel like it's sort of duck planing or duck diving like F1 cars do on a track. It sort of feels like it's bouncing up and down on the front and the rear when you're going on some uneven surfaces. But most of the time it's fairly comfortable. I like the amount of space in here. The speakers are pretty decent for some no-name speakers that you get splashed around the cabin here. It's a 6-speaker setup, so it's nothing too impressive, and it does have a virtual subwoofer, and you do have some customizable modes for your EQ, but that's about it. And then there is an app that you can create with this car, but when I went to go create the actual profile for it, there was a glitch and it wouldn't let me create a profile at all, which was quite frustrating. So I would say that the connected services experience was already frustrating without even being able to create an account to log in. And another thing that's sort of frustrating is the safety systems here for the radar cruise control. I do find them to be a bit rudimentary. It's not too good at taking corners at speed, and it's just a bit nervous around other cars. Even if you set the radar distance to the lowest amount, it does just feel a little bit nervous the whole time. But what is good is the 360-degree parking camera, which means you can get really close to the car in front if you have to squeeze into a car space, thanks to that camera being placed right up the front, which is really quite useful. And there are a few rattles that you can hear inside this car, but that's not really out of the ordinary in an electric car like this, where you're usually going to hear more because there's no engine or gearbox. And look, the materials in here as well are just what you'd expect when you're saving money on a performance electric car. There's lots of hard plastics, but there are some soft touch materials, and yes, that suede material on the doors and the seats does add to this feeling a bit more premium. But all in all, what the MG4 X-Power is about is that it's meant to be really simple to live with, which it is, and the charging experience is good. The actual living experience with it, like living with the day-to-day, is really easy. And then the performance as well is part of the package, which you really can appreciate. You can go from normal traffic speeds like this, and then you see that the actual speed starts to climb up, and you can just plant it. It becomes like an actual rocket ship. This thing will really surprise a lot of people who try to drag race this thing. But I will say that the all-wheel drive system is just a little bit, it could do with some refinement. As soon as it hits some slippery bits of road, it does get a bit upset, which is something that's just a little bit frustrating, because you would hope when you have an all-wheel drive system it would feel far more confidence inspiring than this does when it hits a bit of gravel or maybe a slippery bit of road. I would say that the Tesla Model 3 is still up there as the top EV suggestion, and it it is still a great value for money car, especially with the new update. It's going to be quite hard to compete against that around that price point of the mid $60,000 range, but this does still undercut that base Model 3. So if you're talking price for price, this is still the more affordable EV, and you are getting more power out of this thing and an all-wheel drive system. And as I'm driving along, we've gotten our first warning for our rear right tire, so we'll have to check that out and pull over briefly. Now it says a sensor's just gone out, so I can't read how much air is in it, but that is not a good sign. So after hopping out and having a look, doesn't seem like anything's wrong with our tire. It just seems like the sensor is a bit upset that it can't read how much air is in the tire, which is a bit concerning for me as well. So we'll see how that goes. But it's refreshing to see that MG is offering a performance car without asking a ludicrous amount of money. Now, if you have some money stashed over and you're looking for a performance MG and you don't want an MG4, well, the Cyberster, which rides on the same platform this does, is coming out shortly. And so that will cost more than this, but it does look better. It does have doors that go up, which is kind of interesting. And that might be something you might want to wait for if you are waiting for a performance EV, but with a bit more theatre to it, where this is more of a practical EV that happens to have plenty of performance underneath it. Now, thank you so much for watching. My name is Cameron. This is Product Review Cars. If you want to see more performance electric car reviews just like this, make sure you hit subscribe. And if you want to see more car content, follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Product Review Cars. And make sure to leave a review of your own car on productreview.com.au to let everyone know what it's like to own your car. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.